we're just like, are we going to do this again? And then, you kind of like see the next 5 or 10 years of your life.
I'm joined today by Sam from Mastra, who you may also know as the founder of Gatsby.
People want to build agents, they just don't know how. And so in the AI world, like being able to see what your software is doing is 10 times as important. On an average week, we hand out about 1,500 copies of this book. We as humans are experiential people. Like we learn by playing around and trying things. And the more iterations of something we do, the faster we learn.
You went to Japan recently or something.
We did. I personally did not go to Japan, but Abhi and Tony from our team did.
That's so cool. And apparently, like he was saying that there a lot of people were using Mastra in Japan.
Yeah. In Japan, for whatever reason, both like tons of TypeScript user folks and loving to tinker with innovative stuff. We just had like sort of this like viral takeoff. Actually, one of the main reasons that people in Japan sort of adopted Mastra so quickly was that Dev Twitter still sort of works in Japan in a way that it hasn't since Elon bought the platform in the US. Because the Japanese devs are like kind of agnostic to American politics, and they're sort of like, whatever, like we're hanging out here, we'll keep hanging out here. And so you get these sort of, people start, just talking about the tools that they like using, and then people start, retweeting that. And then they also have a lot of like essentially similar sites to like dev.to where like folks will like post articles they write. And so a lot of those type of articles that started going viral on Japanese Twitter.
Do you know what it's called, their version of dev.to, in case anyone's like, I need to try
if you search like QLIKA, like .dev is the URL.
Okay, super cool.
But so we have about like 20% of our users.
20% of your users are in Japan.
20% of our users are in Japan, and so we've internationalized the docs into Japanese. I mean, it's the only language they're in other than English. Because it was like, hey, like, I mean, we're not going to sort of like, do this for any other language, but if 20% of your users are in Japan, you should probably have your docs in Japanese.
That's so cool. Do you think people are missing a trick on like the Japanese market then for DevTools?
I think that the Japanese market loves like AI stuff in particular, like very particular forms of AI stuff. And then if you happen to go viral in Japan, then, just get ready to go fly to meet in Tokyo, where you kind of get treated as local celebrities.
Really?
Yeah.
Super cool. Yeah. Yeah. I spent a little bit of time in Japan, and I was going to like a lot of meetups, and then they have like, they're actually like really big. I think at that time, this was a few years ago. At the time, it was, I would say, bigger than way more AI events than in London when I was there.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's still the case.
I mean, I think the country has this sort of, robotics is also very big in Japan. But the country is very dedicated to kind of, and I think like culturally AI is like an extension of that, as well. I think what matters now a lot for AI is just kind of interest, because there's a whole huge like bulk of people who are trying to become AI engineers and like working on sort of small AI engineering projects that could become big AI engineering projects. And the relative driving factor there is enthusiasm.
Because it's also new. And
because it's also new, because you have to sort of like think about, in very rare cases, people are telling you, hey, we should automate this with AI. It's more like, if anything, maybe like the CEO in a company is like, AI is really important, please go do an AI thing. But it's really up to you as an engineer to figure out what is the AI thing you want to do, and then go do it.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. So I suppose SF became the hub because a lot of people were like, had that mentality.
I mean, obviously the startup community plays a large role too. half of our YC batch a few months back was various types of like vertical agent companies, so AI for various industries, and so like we know what does that YC, what do YC and what does the venture ecosystem in general do? It brings all these people to SF Bay Area, and kind of concentrates them there, and then there's a local meetup scene that any night that if you're traveling in SF, you could visit 2 to 3 AI meetups. There's a group called Generative AI SF. If you like sort of search for that, you see a bunch of Luma events. And I think it's like, it's kind of it ends up being a very self sort of perpetuating the ecosystem. You also have like all these DevTool AI companies and other sort of that are kind of like also want to foster this. So they hold the meetups and host the meetups and then, encourage all the conversation, right? So
yeah, true. Scaling DevTools is sponsored by WorkOS. If things start going well, some of your customers are going to start asking for enterprise features. Things like audit trails, SSO, skim provisioning, role-based access control. These things are hard to build, and you could get stuck spending all your time doing that instead of actually making a great dev tool. That's why WorkOS exists. They help you with all of those enterprise features, and they're trusted by OpenAI, Vercel, and Perplexity. And for user management, the first 1 million monthly active users are completely free. Let's hear from Utpal from Digger.dev, a dev tool using WorkOS.
How it's designed is that you can start as early as day 0. But for us, it wasn't day 0. It was closer to when we first started monetizing because we didn't have a sign up at all. People could just anonymously use our tool. So it was a little later. It coincided with when we wanted to start monetizing and we needed a nice enterprise feature set. If you're open source and you're doing enterprise first, the minute you think about monetization is when you should think about WorkOS. To be honest, if we do that again, I think I would think about that on day 0, to be honest, because we should have done it on day 0 ideally. Anonymous usage should be permitted, but you should know who's using your tool. It should be optional, 100%. It should be opt-in, 100%. But it'd be great to have auth from day 0. You don't necessarily think about these enterprise features, but they still lead to revenue. And it kind of is a no-brainer in that sense. So yeah, I highly recommend.
And actually, so Sam, so I discovered Mastra at Swix's World Fair, and it was there was a WorkOS workshop, and I went along. Obviously, WorkOS sponsored the podcast, so I'm absolutely going to go along anyway. But it was genuinely such a good workshop, but it wasn't really about WorkOS. They just built something very cool with Mastra. I think it was like a GIF, not GIF, like a meme generator, right? It was like could write an agent that would
super
write.
fun, yeah.
Yeah, it was very fun, and people were like, I feel a lot of people were like complaining about the Wi-Fi and stuff like that. It was very like lots of conference memes, and it was really a cool experience, Mastra, and like the developer experience is very, very awesome. And you've written this book as well about agents and building agents, not just with Mastra, but in general. And so that was a very cool way to come across you and come across Mastra. But maybe you can kind of share a bit more about Mastra.
Yeah, I mean, so what I will say about that workshop was it was incredibly surreal to build a thing and then show up and magically somebody else is giving a workshop about the thing that you have built and teaching everybody else about it. I think there's something, I've been previously I was the co-founder of Gatsby, and so like you sort of learn to recognize like markers along the journey, and that is like a very big one and a very humbling and flattering one. And then second, it was like Nick and Zach put together like a great demo and a great presentation, and what happened in WorkOS was just that somebody demoed it to the entire company, and then all of a sudden all of a sudden like 5 or 6 different groups and like 10 different developers within the company started using it. So and like just organically to solve various problems, which is also very cool. Mastra is a TypeScript framework for building AI agents, and so people use it to hey, I'm gonna for tasks that like might be something locally, like hey, I'm gonna like build an agent that creates Jira tickets for me with all the context from GitHub issues or whatever. Or people use it to build to like ship agency features inside their SaaS app, or people use it to build startups that are building agents in a particular industry, let's say, or a coding agent, or and automating a bunch of work. So Mastra has a number of different AI agent primitives, like agents, workflows, RAG, tools, evals, and so we see ourselves as basically a complete framework for building agents in TypeScript.
Yeah, I've been dabbling with agent stuff recently, and it's like there's so many things that you don't think about that I think are that you've tried to make it easier. And I felt like, in the book you talk about stuff like how to like update people on what's on the progress and all these sorts of things that you're not really thinking about that are like quite tricky to do. And it's quite nice that you've got like an opinion on all these things, and just like you're thinking about them and trying to make it easier for people to do that sort of like common thing.
Back last year, we were actually learning about agents ourselves. We were building sort of the AI and agency parts of a CRM, and we were kind of going through this learning journey of like what are all the different things you have to do, and I think like what we discovered was that we were just kind of learning it all ourselves and using a bunch of different libraries, and we were like, hey, why don't we just build the framework that makes the journey really easy?
Did you have like a conversation, like a knowing look of like building another framework?
Yeah, I mean, we just kind of like you look at each other and like we're like, are we gonna do this? Because we know we can do a good job doing this, but like, is this what we're gonna do? Yeah, I guess this is what we're gonna do. Let's go do it.
What do you think you learned from Gatsby that you're bringing to Mastra?
A lot of the concerns are very similar, so you have to think very deeply about bundling and tree shaking, and in various instances. For example, we have like a local dev server that people really like using, that sort of shows you your agents and your workflows and your other kind of primitives locally, and lets you kind of experiment and play around with them. And so like we had to do a ton of bundling stuff to get that to work right. Just like the knowing the nuances of CJS and ESM, all this. There's a bit of sort of like this kind of like niche esoteric knowledge. API design is, I think the other thing that is like develop just a ton of nuance around a developer experience. Designing the right APIs, the nouns and verbs that you use to make a framework, to make the framework. We realize like once you ship these, right, once you ship a noun or a verb, you kind of in some ways you're pretty stuck with it.
So like that'll be like a workflows. You've got like workflows and agents and tools and
and that would be the noun, and then your workflow has steps, and then the different steps have there's different ways of dot parallel or dot branch or dot then, and like we have this sort of fluent syntax for chaining it together. These are kind of things like decisions. Once you make these kind of decisions, it's very difficult to change them.
Yeah.
I think like, so Mastra started by myself and my co-founder Shane and Abhi, who are at Gatsby as well. Um, but then like we sort of have brought over a number of the most of like the engineers from Gatsby have kind of joined as well. Ward Peters, Tony Kovanen, Tyler Barnes, who are kind of responsible for like building and maintaining the framework over time. And I think like we all just have a like very shared sense of, hey, here's how you interact with the community, and sort of just whether it's like engaging in GitHub issues in Discord, etc. And there's a sense of like the, really high quality documentation and what that looks like. So I think like in many ways, like we're building an AI agent framework, and some things are particular to the AI agent bit, and some bits are particular to the TypeScript framework bit, and we're finding that a lot of the things, maybe most of the things, carry over.
Yeah. And I don't know, do you want to, is there like a kind of, was it a question of like whether this makes sense in TypeScript or like, because I guess like there is like some, I don't know what are more people building stuff with TypeScript than Python in agents, or is it like still like Python's kind of dominating that? Or
the interesting thing has been that sort of, the AI development in general has been in the middle of a shift. So 2 years ago, people doing AI stuff, it was primarily like machine learning, these sort of matrix multiplication type things. And so, the ecosystem started in Python. To do agent stuff, you don't need to do any of that. You're building on top of the OpenAI and the Claude, Gemini APIs, right? You're managing context windows, the context that you're feeding into the LLMs, and sort of like, doing interesting things with the responses, but it's all API driven. But for legacy reasons, when we kind of came on the scene, the ecosystem was very biased towards Python, and so there weren't really good tools in TypeScript. As their tooling in TypeScript has gotten better, and so like, that's us. That's other tools like Stagehand from the is from from Browserbase. Yeah. As the tooling is, the shift has changed, and actually a good way to see that, or a good metric, is the proportion of startups from each YC batch that are building their agents in Python versus TypeScript. And so we were in the winter batch, so it was from January to March, and we knew most of the startups, and it was about 35% of the agent startups were building in TypeScript. But then we talked to a couple companies in the next batch that were also very kind of like aware of like all the companies in their batch building agents, and this was like only 3 months later, and they said, oh yeah, it's like 55-60% TypeScript. And we were just like mind blown, like what because like there's so many new people coming into the field, and like those folks are wanting to use TypeScript.
That's very cool. That's very, very cool. It makes sense. I mean, as you put it, like you don't need to like do matrix multiplication and stuff like that. Then why not just use the tools that you're building for the web? Like same reason, I guess, for other reasons why JavaScript won out, I guess, or dominated. Yeah. Very cool.
Never bet against JavaScript. I always bet on JavaScript.
And so could you also tell us about the book that you've written, which is very good, by the way? People should go download it. It's free.
So this is Principles of AI Agents. I think we were having these conversations. We were bringing in a lot of folks who are building with agents into our office, and just kind of doing these like whiteboarding sessions, where it was kind of like, describe what you're building and like maybe, we'll just like walk through it together. And what we realized was that like there's a lot of knowledge that goes into how you design it, and just like kind of conceptual around like what are these different concepts? Why would you use a workflow in one case and an agent in another case? What is a RAG pipeline? What are the different steps? Like, what are evals? Evals are just tests. Anyways, there are all these kind of topics. And like conceptually, like it was helpful for people to fill in the missing sort of pieces, as well as like, and so we realized that we wanted to just kind of like encapsulate and encode a lot of this knowledge in a way that could be easily shared. I think, like, I was actually listening to a podcast about the Michelin as a company, and like in 1900, like when there were like only a few hundred cars in France, like these Michelin brothers with their tire company wrote like a guide of like restaurants. Like it didn't, like it just kind of showed people what to do with their cars and like where to go or whatever. And maybe that this is kind of the equivalent for the agent, things like how do you build it? What are the main concepts that you need to know? And what we've sort of started, we've started just going to hackathons and AI engineer and just handing out copies of books, and we've gotten great kind of like reception feedback, and people have said, hey, this is like really useful as I've been like getting into agents and understanding what could we even build with agents inside my company, or what could I build as a fun project with agents, and what are all these different things that I keep hearing about, and how do they fit, like what is the knowledge hierarchy that they kind of fit into?
Yeah, it is really good, and it's very cool that it's like physical. I don't know, it's like definitely stands out, like having just like a physical book on something which is so up to date, because I guess like that's the issue with books, is like often it's not like super up to date, but your book is like extremely up to date, with like tool recommendations and stuff like that, like DevTools to use and things like that, even though it's probably changing every few months or faster.
I mean, we started writing in February, published the first version in March, and then we published an updated second edition in May. I think we try to keep this thing up to date because it obviously is so a lot of the concepts are sort of what happens is that the knowledge is kind of accretive, in the sense of so I'll give an example, like something that kind of happened recently is that agents got much better at like sort of like answering questions using like web search tools. If if you see deep research and or like Claude has an equivalent, you kind of can see this as well, right? So like this is, if you like do this when you're building an agent inside your company for some for product use case, you would call this like for retrieving knowledge, you would call this like an agentic RAG, which is kind of a different way of retrieving knowledge using AI tooling than the original sort of RAG paradigm. So we sort of already had a RAG chapter, and now we have like an agentic RAG section within the the RAG chapter.
So it's not like a whole like wholesale like change the whole. It's like a that makes sense. And I guess like your views on things and what's important and what isn't will change, but hopefully the broad topics will be quite similar.
Yeah, they built like the layers of knowledge, like any engineering domain, build on each other. So if you are a full stack developer and then you start getting into data engineering, let's say, there's going to be a set of topics that you kind of learn over time, and you become a better data engineer over time. Because like that field sort of emerged 5-10 years ago, and AI engineering as a field is emerging now. But in the same way, like the kind of topics are like very, the knowledge sets are sort of built on top of each other. I think that's like actually one of our big lessons to engineers who are getting into AI engineering is that like some people like find the terminology that like can be used in the jargon in the field like off-putting or just like frightening or whatever. And we're like, look, it's, a lot of the concepts that will translate over. When someone says evals, they just kind of mean tests, and your intuition around writing tests will translate over to this new world. It's not a different thing. It's just an extension of your existing knowledge. And by the way, I don't think that was always true. I think like 2 years ago, with the types of ML that that you'd have to do, I think that was like a very different kind of field. But I think now it's agent AI engineering and building agents is really just an assistance and other related things is really just an extension of what we do as software engineers.
And yeah, because it's API, you're basically just the AI is the API calls that you're making. So
yes,
true. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How do you see Mastra like kind of evolving? Like you're building like a hosted version at some point, right? I've seen it kind of mentioned.
So we recently launched Mastra Cloud into public beta, which is basically a hosting. So it's like a runtime, a serverless runtime, for your agents, syncs with your GitHub commits, and you push in, a new commit, and you can deploy a new version of your agents that's hosting, right? And then sort of like a little bit of observability, so that's tracing, tracing and evals. I'm going to sort of like digress a little bit before I come back, but it turns out that in AI world, like being able to see what your software is doing is 10 times as important as it is in normal software engineering, because LLMs are non-deterministic, and so they just diverge in more interesting ways than the normal engineering does. And so this kind of like notion of observability becomes even more important than it is normally. So I mean, but so I think like from a we think that like we see the journey on is basically building the best TypeScript framework for building agents, and then building kind of the dedicated cloud hosting and observability platform. From that, obviously our lessons were very informed by having built sort of Gatsby Cloud as a serverless hosting platform for Gatsby sites, and scaling it to a few million ARR, and then also obviously seeing Netlfiy and Vercel and other platforms. Again, like I think
no, super cool.
This is actually another place where there's a lot of sort of carryover in that from kind of Gatsby days, in that building a PaaS platform to run your users' code is sort of substantively different from an infrastructure standpoint than building a SaaS. We have this Kubernetes set up on Google Cloud that we did last time, and we're doing it again with the same Avi, my co-founder, and Tony Kovanen, who is built the first version of Gatsby Cloud, and now they're building they built Mastra Cloud. So and it's we're just like, are we going to do this again? And then you kind of like see the next like 5 or 10 years of your life, because exactly what the journey is, like with a lot higher precision than you usually do when starting a company, when you've started the previous version of the company and run it for several years.
That's very cool though. But it's like the mechanics are the same, but very different. Very different area, very different product. But like same kind of like, I guess. Like you've been on the journey to mastery.
Yeah. I mean, okay, like, a lot of times it's like, well, what parts of our old GK setup did we, not like, or, gonna just again, what about our, infra analytics pipeline to, or did we not, like, or not like, okay, like, it's sort of like, if you got to build a similar version of the old thing again, you get to walk through your engineering tree of decisions again, and so you have some knowledge of what's in front of you, which is it's both fun and good. But
yeah, it's very, very cool. And it seems like Mastra has been taking off a lot. I mean, obviously established big in Japan now as well, and taken over AI Engineers World Fair. What have you been doing for marketing and stuff like that? Like putting the word out?
I think like a lot of it. So there's a variety of different things. So number one, I think your best form of marketing is always your docs and your changelogs, and so we spend a ton of time making sure those are really good and complete.
So this is a dumb question, Sam, but how does the changelog like drive the growth? Is it like the people start talking? Is it, you mean like because people see that it's growing, or like
people see the regular cadence of feature releases as a sign that the project is a sign of life of a project, from oh, this thing is completely dead, to yeah, like it's on maintenance mode, to like
they're pushing,
oh yeah, the team's shipping some stuff, to like the team is shipping stuff, this is exciting, this could be like the new thing. And like people see the sort of like the volume of things that we're pushing out day to day, week to week, is like, yeah, this is like and that was like a feature they did last week, and this is a feature they're doing this week, and so I think like that's, and then we push them out through social. We push them out through social. We also have published things on GitHub when people come to browse the project, like the sort of, which is more of like a PR level view. These are the 35 PRs we shipped this week, and here's the links to each one in a short description. But like I think these are and like people gravitate, rightly so, to projects that they think are not only they look at the feature set, but they also look at the velocity, because it's it's position, and it's also slope of the project, and so we inherently as developers judge the slope of a project by this kind of like changelog type stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. And sorry, I interrupted you though. You were saying that like the docs and changelog are the driving force.
So the docs and the changelog are like, I think like then we spend a lot. We've been publishing two or three sort of stories of Mastra users every week, just kind of like putting them on our blog, sort of like pushing them out through social media, which is, again, it's sort of like the book. It's like people want to do this, and they just, the best social proof, the more social proof they have that like, hey, this could work for me, that's kind of like very helpful and useful for them. So we probably like we hand out about and I'm gonna say this number and you're gonna laugh, but on an average week we hand out about 1,500 copies of this book at various events and conferences, because like a lot of times people want to build agents, they just don't know how. And so if they see a book called Principles of Building AI Agents, they pick it up and they start reading, and they're like, oh, I guess this is how I do it. And so that that drives growth sort of significantly. And then people will then like post about post about that their experiences building Mastra or reading the book on social media, and we'll repost. But I think like the other thing is, like, I think it's you can point to, here are the external things we do, but like the core growth of any developer tool is people telling their friends. Well, there's two things. There's one is people telling their friends, and then like we as developers are very analytical about how we're like, well, I need a tool that does X thing. In this case, I need I need a bundler, or I need a project to set up my monorepo, or like I need a TypeScript framework to build agents. And then they kind of analytically are like, what is the right tool for the job? And so if you're kind of showing evidence that you are the best tool for the job, and then like they kind of gravitate towards you naturally. So those are like, I think like the things we spend a lot of time thinking about, both of those different pieces. How do you get people to tell your friends? Well, you need to sort of create something that people love. One of the things that people love the most is our dev server, because it gives you this like real time sort of like feedback on what you're doing. And so we just spend a lot of time polishing it and making it great. And every time someone's like, hey, I wish that you could show me this information in this way, we like add some way of doing that. And it's a really cool sort of and just like, because we've like obsessed about that, then like people can tell that we've obsessed about that, and then they're like, this Mastra's dev server is really cool, this is like, it was just so neat. And then like then they like tells all their friends, and the cycle goes on.
I guess it's very visual, your dev server, like the dashboard, and then also it's like the first thing you do kind of as well, right? Like, so it feels like the fact that it's really good and it's like visual and it's like right up front, like that was the first thing I saw when I set up to follow the getting started guide. It's like, check out the dashboard. Oh wow, cool. Like I can see all these things that I wouldn't otherwise have known how to see and interact with it. And
we as humans are experiential people. Like, we learn by playing around and trying things, and the more iterations of something we do, the faster we learn, right? And that's why little children try so many random things, because I have every couple of kids, like they're just experimenting about the world. And I think like we wanted to create something like, I just like got an agent out of the box, and I could poke and play around with it, and then what the agent does changes, and I can test out workflows, and it's just very like, it's very experiential, and it like helps you with that like learning loop. But it also helps you with the, okay, cool, I've learned how this all works. But it also helps you with the, hey, I'm like just iterating on this and making it better, because it's really the same kind of thing, just at different levels of fidelity, or different levels of knowledge.
Yeah it's very cool. Experiential, make it playful. Very cool. I have to ask you about the books. I mean, that sounds like 1,500 a week.
Yes.
Like, logistically, how are you pulling this off?
I mean, we there's a lot of meetups in SF and conferences in SF, and we'll also travel to other places. The book is on Amazon. We published it through Amazon, so we are just honestly piggybacking on a very talented logistics company that will ship the book to wherever we need it to, which is usually like to our
okay.
Yeah.
So a lot of these are like just like people order it through the website and stuff. Because I was thinking, or you just hand out at the meetups like 1,500.
No, we do. We will order a box of, we will make an order of 500 books, and then we will, show up in Atlanta and just distribute them at Render, right? Or and you sort of like, you go around the conference and you kind of leave them on the tables, and then they sort of like vanish into people's like. Well, when I was a kid and my mom wanted me to read something, she would literally just get a book from the library, and she would like put it on the ground, and I would like go sit on the ground and read the book. It's like nerds typing, right? Like you're just like, are you really interested in? We get really interested in stuff, and so if so we go around conferences, and we put them. We put it around conferences, and people pick it up, and people read the book, and events and meetups are the same way.
Very cool. So Bezos is a double win on you, of like, it's like AWS. I don't know if you said you're GCPing me, but
or
so maybe not. He's lost out on that, but
yeah.
let's make it up for it on books.
Yes.
Yeah. One thing that I wanted to ask you, just because I'm sure like some people are kind of buzzword, but you've written about MCP in your book.
Yes.
And as a kind of like stepping back, like should all DevTools be building an MCP server at this point, or?
I mean, I think MCPs are great for like a number of, I think like every time when you're building an API, right, a publicly accessible API, right, you should consider like, hey, should I also be building an MCP server here? Right. If the publicly accessible API is for normal traffic, maybe the MCP server could be for agentic traffic. I think it's a really so for context, MCP is a new protocol that Anthropic has kind of put out about essentially think about it as untrusted tool use by agents. Let's say I have an agent that wants to access somebody else's information, and you need to do this for any sort of like, hey, I need to browse the web, or I need to access data in some location that maybe it's in Google Drive or whatever that I don't necessarily control, but like that agent needs the data in that location to be able to answer a question well. And so MCP sort of went viral as a protocol. I see it as kind of like this agentic successor to Open API, right? In that like it's a good sort of like framework for how to act. So if you're building with agents, I would say like, and there's also really cool things you can do with it. We have an MCP server for our docs. And what that means is that, if you're using Cursor or Windsurf or VS Code, you can install the Mastra MCP server, and it will have up-to-date, it has tools to grab up-to-date versions of all the code and docs and reason about them and throw them into context for your Cursor or Windsurf, agent.
I saw you actually have that in your installation process as well, right? It's very cool how you just say like, do you want to make your agent an expert on Mastra?
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like really cool.
Because it turns out that, while reading the docs is one way of, learning to build with the framework. Also, if your agent that's writing most of your code for you, or at least writing a first draft of most of your code for you anyway, locally on your machine, can read those docs as well. It can, generate higher fidelity, first drafts of whatever you're trying to build. So I think there are also like lots of these kinds of like use cases that are like neat or interesting or cool for folks to explore, that of like, maybe they could build an MCP server. If you're trying to analyze some data set, for example, like some medium-sized data set, maybe it's like your corpus of blog posts or whatever, like consider just like writing an MCP server that like, has the tools that you would give a human analyst, get all posts, get posts by category, get specific post or whatever. And then like, search across posts, and then like make some MCP server that wraps these kind of tools, right? As MCP server as a container for tools, and then install it on your local Cursor Windsurf and start asking it questions. So one of our investors, Alana Goyal, did this for her blog, and then she has this great demo where she's like, it's like a recording of her like asking, like typing in, the Windsurf agent and asking it questions about herself, and it's like retrieving information about her from her blog.
Oh yeah, I saw that from your book actually, right? It was like, and she asked like, what's your who's her favorite portfolio company, and there's like no comment or something, right?
Yeah. He gave some polite response there. It's like, well, these are her favorite restaurants, and like gave a very informative response there, and just gave like a polite non-reply on that particular question. She loves them all equally.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, she was like a big theme in your book, actually. I felt she got like about, I think even like when she wasn't mentioned, it was like our investor. And I was like, I know for a fact that is a lot.
Yeah. I mean, unlike, it's just very unusual in that she just like, yeah, for an investor in that like she loves playing around with all sorts of tools. And so she's been great. She's given us a number of like useful, like, and helpful like feedback. There's one weekend in particular where we you know, Shane, my co-founder, and her were sort of like, you know, basically ended up debugging the differences in how the cursor and windsurf agents were implementing the MCP spec. Like there were like these subtle changes. We're like, okay, we like shipped sort of the correct version of our MCP server, but it turns out that the cursor and the windsurf agents have implemented the spec slightly differently, and so we actually needed it was an interesting fun weekend.
That's added value, added VC value.
Yeah.
Sam, this was really awesome. I wanted to ask if you got any kind of shout outs, say if you want to send people to get the book or
yeah, I mean, shout out. So you can get the book if you want a digital copy for free. You can go to mastra.ai/book and grab a digital copy. You can grab a physical copy on Amazon. If you want to install and use Mastra, it's npm create Mastra at latest, and it'll walk you through that setup guide that you kind of mentioned. So from the command line, I think like, you know, shout out to both, you know, the Mastra team for like, I mean, just we've run a great group. Like I think like I get the privilege of coming here and chatting with you, but I'm really just representing the work that, you know, a team of really incredible human beings who I have the privilege of like getting to work with for the second time have done. So shout out to, you know, all the members of the Mastra team.
Shout out Mastra team.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Sam, and thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks for having me on, Jack.